Hi, everybody, and welcome to Building for Digital Equity. The Building for Digital Equity is an educational series of live stream events and a podcast to inform and debate digital inclusion efforts. The series uses both interviews and events to explore solutions and share lessons learned by the people who are working towards digital equity. Today's event is hosted by Institute for Local Self-Reliance and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and the Building for Digital Equity live streams are being sponsored by Utopia Fiber, which is the largest open access fiber network in the nation. My name is Pamela, she, they, and I am the Training and Community Engagement Manager at NDIA. NDIA advances digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We advocate for broadband access, tech devices, digital skills training, and tech support. Today, NDIA has over 1,400 affiliates, including 23 tribal entities and organizations in all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. And I will be your MC for today, along with Chris Mitchell.
Thank you, Pamela. I am excited to be back once again with you doing this series. I'm going to quickly introduce myself and then share how to comment, which is really important. We really want people to throw thoughts in, questions in, and anything else into the chat that they think is appropriate. I am the program manager, the program director for the Community Broadband Networks program at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. I go by the pronouns he and him. And we are excited to be working with National Digital Inclusion Alliance on this project. We do plan to have one more this year, probably in November, I'm going to guess. Quick question, people, where is the best way to get involved and ask questions and things like that? YouTube, NDIA's YouTube channel is the best place to go to tune in. So you might be seeing this on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, or X, or I don't know. But if you're live, you go to YouTube, it's going to be easier to offer comments and things like that. If you have other questions, you can email them to our team. You may know some of us, but you can also hit up Christine Parker at christine@ilsr.org or broadband@muninetworks.org. All roads lead to Rome. Let me hand it back to Pamela after I say one other thing, which is that, we'll say this at the end, but this show is ambitious. We're trying to do new things, keep it exciting, keep it quick. And along the way, I'll just say that my job was to just show up and look good. I couldn't even do that correctly, but I am excited, and I really appreciate all the great work of folks from Community Broadband Networks at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and Pamela, you and your team at National Digital Inclusion Alliance for making this happen behind the scenes, setting up all the interviews and everything else.
Thanks so much, Chris. And we're so grateful for our affiliates who will be here today and sharing some really great takeaways. But I wanted to share that it is Digital Inclusion Week. Digital Inclusion Week is the first week of October, and it's an annual week of awareness, recognition, and celebration of all of the digital inclusion efforts we've made in our communities. So organizations and individuals across the country host special events and campaigns to promote and increase digital equity in their communities. And I also want to give a special shout out to the Albany Public Library, who is having a watch party for this event. Hi, Albany Public Library. I hope you're enjoying. And if you are participating in Digital Inclusion Week or your organization is hosting an event, we want to know. Visit our Digital Inclusion page to share how you'll be participating during this week so you can get on our map.
And I just wanted to jump in to say I'm going to try and keep it clean then. And I'm excited for viewing parties. But I did want to highlight one last time. We really want to thank Utopia Fiber for sponsoring this. Utopia Fiber has been a great partner for our work in this area, and we look forward to continuing that. So thank you, Utopia Fiber, a collection of communities in Utah that have built the nation's largest open access fiber network. Go ahead,
Awesome.
Pamela. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So our agenda for the next hour starts off by focusing on the Affordable Connectivity Program. We'll have Sian Tesfaye, the Senior Policy and Research Program Manager with NDIA, to start us off with an ACP level setting. Afterwards, we'll jump into our favorite lightning round segment that focuses on lessons learned on outreach work for covered populations. Then we'll shift gears and focus on how telehealth can be a key driver for broadband adoption. We'll hear from Jeff Milner with the Enterprise Center and learn about their work with Orchard Knob neighborhood. And lastly, you'll hear from our keynote speaker, Joshua Edmonds with Digital C, the Cleveland-based nonprofit technology social enterprise. He'll focus on the link between building appropriately motivated physical networks and how infrastructure and digital equity work go hand in hand.
Now, I think many people here know what the ACP is. We're about to get into some of the details, but for folks who are still trying to figure out all of this stuff, the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, is a broadband affordability program, provides a discount of up to $30 per month for qualifying households for internet access to lower their costs. Also, that goes to $75 per month on reservations. There's also a one-time discount for equipment, and that can be used to purchase a desktop computer, a tablet from providers that are participating in that program. Our ACP dashboard, which is acpdashboard.com, has listed that there are 21 million households, I should say, that are currently signed up and using that program. That is still less than half of the eligible populations, but we are forecasting that will run out of funds next year in the second quarter, sometime in potentially May or June. I think Sion may have more information about that, but you can ask questions in the chat along the way, and we'll pose those when we finish. So let's bring Sion out here and get going. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy Digital Inclusion Week. Here with you all to talk about ACP and what the state of play is in Congress right now with the funding, some considerations for what we might be thinking about or expect if the program is not funded again, and some advocacy strategies that we hope people will use to make sure that members of Congress understand how crucial this program is. So with that, I'll start our slides. Just give us just a second to get them up. Great, next slide. So here is sort of the timeline / state of play. ACP is expected to run out of funding by about April of 2024. We think that's probably the last month ACP can fully be funded. And this estimate is, based on the number of people enrolled right now and what we expect that rate of enrollment to be going into the early part of next year. So Congress does need to act. ACP does need to be in the budget this year, in the budget that Congress passes, in order for ACP to be funded through the end of 2024. Right now, ACP is not really formally part of any budget consideration in Congress right now. Nobody's introduced a bill with provisions for ACP funding. So that's the really big problem that we're working on right now and encouraging advocates to work on as well. And it's important to keep in mind that we need a short-term solution for ACP, right? So that's this appropriations process, getting it in the funding bill by the end of the year, but we need a long-term solution for ACP funding. So we don't have to keep re-engaging this appropriations process, begging for Congress to fund this program, every other year. Next slide. So one reason to remain a little bit hopeful about getting ACP in the funding bill at the end of this year is that it does enjoy a lot of bipartisan support. So on the state level, support from Republicans and Democrats, and we've seen members of Congress of both parties come out and express support for ACP. So we just need a lot of that vocal support and letter signing on to turn into actualized funding for ACP. Next slide. So what will happen if ACP ends? So the FCC will issue what's called like a wind down process. So that process will give all of the details about what the rules will be like to governing the closing down of ACP. So I'll have very specific rules in there for how providers should be communicating with consumers. I also expect the FCC to be in close communication with ACP outreach grant recipients. So there's a lot of people, a lot of organizations right now who have received outreach grant funds from the FCC and are working right now to try to enroll people and raise awareness about the program. So of course, ACP ending is going to impact that program, and uncertainty about what's going to happen with ACP, impacts outreach grant recipients right now. We don't know everything that's going to be included in the wind down provisions, because the FCC hasn't issued it yet, but we do know that they've been thinking ahead about the possible bill shock consumers will encounter. So we know that the FCC will require service providers to communicate with consumers about the program's ending and allow consumers to opt in to continue their plan at the higher rate without the ACP benefit. So we definitely know that those things we'll see more details about in the wind down notice, but again, meant to try to minimize the bill shock that people might experience when losing their benefit. Next slide. So what can we be doing and what can we be thinking about if the program does come to an end? So one thing we expect is that provider outreach to consumers is probably not going to be enough to make sure that people are aware that the program is ending and what their rights and options are if the program does end. So we're going to need to step up and make sure that our communities are aware of their rights and their options if the program does end. And I expect us at NDIA to be thinking more about that and talking more about that in the coming months if the program does come to an end. It's also an opportunity to begin advocacy efforts for more local support for broadband affordability programs. So ACP's ending is going to impact communities in every single state. Its ending could really inspire change at the local level to initiate more long-term affordability options in the state. Next slide. So we're really encouraging people to lean into the power of storytelling. So what kinds of things would be in someone's story if they wanted to communicate to members of Congress how important the program has been to them? We're encouraging people to talk about what life was like before ACP, what you had to scramble to do without having that consistent, reliable, affordable access, and then talk about what you're using the internet for. A lot of people from very privileged backgrounds just can't imagine not having internet and not being able to use it for a lot of the things that we need to use the internet for. And explaining that in plain language and in a really compelling way can go really far to persuading members of Congress. And discuss what you might have to do if you no longer receive that benefit. Next slide. So how do you tell your story? Reaching out to your representatives in Congress, that can look like an email, it can look like a phone call. When you call your representative's office, the staffers do log, how many people called to talk about certain issues and what the issues were about. Sign-on letters with other organizations that are aligned with your mission, and to raise the visibility about the program, writing an op-ed in the local paper. We've seen affiliates do that as well. Next slide. So data can be pretty compelling too. There are a few ways you can do that. If you are writing a letter or can get a meeting with your representative, talk about how many people in the state are using ACP right now. And that data is publicly available on USEC's website. It's also, we have a link to it in our toolkit, and I can share some more information about our toolkit and some of the templates you can use. You can also show your representatives how many people in their congressional district rely on ACP. So that's another way that you can incorporate data into your advocacy efforts. And I feel like I finished early, but I think we have some time for questions. So I'll hand it back to Pamela or Chris.
Me. And we have a question that came in beforehand. One of the people, when they registered, asked about advice for when they are having trouble signing someone up with particularly a mobile provider or finding a provider, someone who, that they could use for their ACP benefit. Do you have any tips of how to help those people doing those signups?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure exactly what the specific challenge might be. Is it sort of an issue with outreach and reaching people, or is it the specific application process itself? I will say, generally, it takes more than one touch point sometimes with people to make sure that they make it all the way through the application process on USEC's website. and are able to apply that benefit with their provider. So it's kind of a two-step thing. So to the degree that there are problems with that, it's it's something that sometimes needs to be addressed in more than one session. With outreach, there's a lot of ways, and I think Virginia will probably talk more about that. I'm seeing a lot of really great examples of interagency coordination at the state level, with sharing information with people who are likely to benefit from ACP because they participate in other public assistance programs. So that's one way to reach people. Another way, I'm learning that people are partnering with schools and school districts, because if one person in the household qualifies for ACP, it qualifies the entire household. So that's another outreach avenue that I've seen people use to try to get the message out. But as far as getting people, once they are aware of it and want to enroll, that two-step process is something that digital navigators are pretty key in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sian. We are going to jump into our first trivia question, but that's a helpful way to start. And I would just add on to that if you have a question about any of this stuff and you're not asking that wonderful listserv the NDIA maintains, that's a great place to go and ask people for help as well to get some additional tips and to learn more. Go ahead, Pamela.
Thanks so much, Chris. You beat me to the punch. I was going to recommend that as well as a resource. All right, so we've got our first trivia question. We've got a few of those sprinkled out for the event today. So first is, how many covered populations are defined in the Digital Equity Act?
So you can throw it in the chat if you would like. You could scream it out your window, but however you would like to answer, this is a self-scored quiz.
If you think there are 5, that'll be A. If you think there are 7, 10, or 8, this was a fun one to think about. And I wonder how many folks that are constantly dealing with the Digital Equity Act might not get this question right.
I see some correct answers in the chat.
Perfect.
So,
awesome.
So the answer that you're looking for.
Yes. Yeah, so the answer is D, which is 8. The Digital Equity Act recognizes 8 covered populations as disproportionately experiencing digital equity. And those 8 are persons who are 60 years of age or older, incarcerated individuals, veterans, persons with disabilities, members of a racial or ethnic minority group, rural residents, individuals with a language barrier, including those who are English learners or have low literacy levels, and individuals living in a household with incomes not exceeding 150% of the poverty level. And covered populations will be the focus of our next segment, which is lightning.
Can I just note also that if you're in California and you answered 10, you would be technically correct in terms of how many that the state of California recognizes, because states can add additional populations to that list. So if our list was as described was the ones defined in the Digital Equity Act, but states have latitude to recognize additional populations as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And so for our next lightning round speakers, you'll be hearing from 3 different digital inclusion practitioners on their outreach strategy for veterans, low-income households, and individuals with language and literacy barriers. So first up, you'll be hearing from Walter Pressure, the digital navigator with Easter Seals Greater Houston.
Digital Inclusion Week. My name is Captain U.S. Army retired Walter Pressure. I did 3 tours in Iraq. I now serve as a digital navigator as part of the National Digital Navigator Corps, working with Easter Seals Greater Houston in the rural areas around Greater Houston, College Station, that area of Texas. What most people don't think about with veterans is the actual need that we have for access to the internet. Almost any one of our veteran benefits is only accessible or primarily accessible through the VA website. If you've ever used any government websites, you understand that they are extremely complex in how they function. It's very difficult to get into the actual va.gov site from your cell phone. It is possible if you know what you're doing, but it is very difficult. So in order to access any of your VA health concerns, to access your educational benefits, to apply for a claim, or to get a second opinion on a claim that you filed for your compensation for your injuries while you've been serving, all that has to be done online. Many of the clients that I have in these rural areas don't have solid access without the ACP. One of my clients, not too far from Houston, the only plan she could get through AT&T was 4 GB down, 1 GB up. By getting her signed up for the ACP, she was able to actually go to a plan that could actually allow her access and allow her to go back to school to work on her associate's degree and eventually on her bachelor's degree. So that was a very exciting thing. Many of our other clients are in areas where the only thing they have available is either fixed wireless or satellite. For many of those plans, the price point is unaffordable without that accessible connectivity program. One of the questions we get asked a lot, if you're wanting to do outreach with veterans, where do you begin? Many states have this. I know Texas is a big one for it. Every county has a veteran service officer appointed by the county judge that basically works their one-stop shop. If anybody needs assistance with their claims, needs assistance with getting their access, they can go to this person. They're a good person to start with. Go to them, explain what your program does, what kind of benefits you offer, what kind of assistance you offer, and they can help get the word out. Likewise, go to veteran service organizations, the other kind of VSOs. So go to your local VFW post, your American Legion post, the Disabled American Veterans. Find the commander or somebody that is on the staff there. Talk to them, explain to them, take information and say, I'm here, we want to offer these benefits. A lot of times they'll invite you to come to their meetings or different activities that they have going on to be able to start putting information out there, to be open and just be open to people reaching out and saying, hey, yes, we really do need this. Usually if you can go in and make a case and saying, this is how we're seeking to assist and this is what we're offering for your fellow veterans, people will be pretty open to engaging and allowing you to share that information. The last group that I often encourage people to talk to, reach out to your local VA clinic or hospital. A lot of times they have case managers or social workers that oversee a variety of the cases. If you can get that information to them, they can get it out to a wide variety of veterans that are in different levels of need, and they can help bridge that connection. A lot of times it is much, much easier to engage somebody with a warm handoff rather than a cold call. And so by getting into the case managers, talking to them, explaining what you're able to do and how you're wanting to help, they can refer people to you and they can say, hey, this person, they can vouch for you with the veterans and say, this is a good person. They're more than happy to help. The big thing is once you, just like with any protected population, once you actually do sit down with a person, be open and honest, understand that veterans have a language of their own. If you're not a veteran, don't try and talk that language, but ask a lot of questions, listen, be empathetic, and develop that relationship so that you can really hear where their needs are and do your best to help them meet every need that they have. I know I went through this really quickly. I'm available if you have any further questions, and be more than happy to talk to anyone one-on-one on what it means to serve those who served us.
Thank you so much, Walter. Really appreciate that in your work. Next up, we have Virginia Benson, the Director of Racial Justice Advocacy with the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, who will talk about outreach strategies with low-income households.
Hi, everyone, and happy Digital Equity Week. I'm here to talk a little bit about the outreach strategies I had for the Affordable Connectivity Program. And I had three basic strategies. First was to really understand the program, really get into the weeds of the program and really understand what the mechanics of it, and then being able to then break that ACP program down into simple, plain English terms to allow people to walk through the program and address common issues that come up with government programs. As was earlier said, they're not always easy to navigate. And I wanted to make sure that the information was going to be easily accessible. So I created a PowerPoint and informational sessions where paper, sort of break down the information in really plain English language, and really provided, hopefully, people information that they could understand and be able to share with others. And so these are just an example. And as Sienna had said earlier, I tried to talk also about the impact of the program in any area that I was providing a speak or giving a session to. So here I was talking to folks in Essex County. This was back in October, and I wanted to show like the impact of the ACP and that county and what it could mean if we increased awareness of the program. And so the second was really to utilize our trusted allies. And so I was not doing direct services. And so I wanted to focus on people who were working with our targeted populations. You know, trust is a huge issue in this area. And so I think hearing about this program from people that are helping you in other ways builds upon that trust and brings some validity to that program. And so, Mass Law Reform Institute, where I work, is an anti-poverty law center. We're also the support center for civil legal aid. And so we work across all substantive areas and have different ways to reach the public. And so I utilized those networks with connecting with folks through the SNAP program, people who are working with the WIC program, which is one of the one of the categories. I worked with folks who were financial aid officers and community and sort of other community outreach. We worked because of our partnerships already in these areas. I was able to work with the Department of Transitional Assistance, that's our state welfare office, to do a huge text message outreach to anybody who was receiving food stamps and SNAP benefits. We worked with libraries and Council on Aging. So you can see these networks are not usually talking about digital equity, but they were seeing the impact of it in their work, whether they were going to a court or whether they needed to have a translator to do their healthcare or navigate other systems, especially as during COVID and we were moving everything online. People were seeing the impact of that on their clients. And so I wanted to make sure that they were aware that there is ways to mitigate these barriers by having this program. And then the other way I did it was really just becoming a resource. Being present and available to folks, really understanding the program and providing them, a sort of a way to cut the red tape if they didn't want to go into the weeds of the program, having me to be able to like bounce off questions to and maybe even be a facilitator if they were having problems with connecting with a provider or with the government. So I've acted as liaison if people were presenting sort of systematic problems with the program, and I would elevate those up to our context and when we were doing some outreach with the government, and then also creating networks with the folks who were from the ISPs. And so if there were problems with people connecting, I would be able to use those context to alleviate some of those problems. And so being a resource, people just didn't need to trust in me. I also was a resource in spreading out other information. So I was always gathering who is doing what and providing those forms of outreach. So I think what has been really important for me, an important strategy for me, was thinking sort of outside of the box and not thinking, I barely understood what the internet was when I started this program. And so I really just utilized our networks and our knowledge about federal benefits and thinking about who is touching those folks who were targeted from this program, and so that folks can hear about this program in multiple ways.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Virginia. And our last and final lightning round speaker is Gwen Weaver, an independent management consultant with Open Door Collective, and is recently retired from working as a broadband program specialist with National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA.
And thank you very much, and happy Digital Inclusion Week to everybody else as well. I'm going to talk about working with covered populations. May I have the first slide, please? Digital Equity Act, as we already have heard, has defined 8 characteristics for covered populations. Many of these individuals and many of the people in these groups have low levels of literacy and are served by the adult education community. Next, please. Next slide. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but there are more than 43 million adults in the US who have low levels of literacy and numeracy. This means that they're not able to read or write above a 3rd grade level or do math above a 4th grade level. Many of these folks have gone through education systems that have just pushed them along, and others have dropped out. Many of them are also newcomers to the country. About half of them are proficient in English, but some are not literate in their home country languages. Everyone in this list needs foundational skills. Next slide. And of course, digital literacy and digital skills are now foundational requirements. Next slide. So the field of adult education is composed of 4 broad functional areas. Next slide. A lot of the activities nested under these 4 broad areas are things that adult education and literacy programs in the United States provide. We teach foundational skills to adult learners with instruction in almost all the areas shown on this slide. Who are adult learners? They're individuals over the age of 16 who may or may not have completed their basic education, who may or may not have a high school diploma, but are people who have gaps in basic skills such as reading, math, or spoken English. They include the working poor, young adults between the ages of 16 and 24, newcomers, that is immigrants and refugees, parents and primary caregivers of school-age children, and older adults and retirees. All of these are folks who are also represented in the list of covered populations. Next slide, please. We as adult education providers teach them to read, write, do math, speak English, and develop computer skills to study and become citizens or gain skills to find a job or start a new career. And they learn about health and money management and how to support children's learning. Many adult education programs also partner with other community organizations to provide access to information about wraparound services like food, housing, jobs, childcare, and transportation. Next slide, please. So what do adult education and digital inclusion have in common? As you can see, throughout our communities, there are schools and libraries and many different organizations working with adults to help them achieve their highest potential. We are all seeking the same objective. Together, we are seeking equity. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gwen. And that wraps up our lightning rounds. Thank you for our lightning round speakers for sharing their lessons learned on their outreach work for their respective covered populations. Chris, I'm passing it over to you.
Yes, and I just also want to say thank you. This is difficult work. I think that we are fortunate that the Digital Equity Act has focused on this, that the federal the government funding programs are focused on making sure that we are exercising these muscles that have, I think, atrophied through not reaching out to these covered populations. And so we're excited to share some tips and hope that that is helpful for you as well as for the states that you're from in terms of doing this work to reach out. Now, we are going to be moving into telehealth to talk about a very cool project. To get us warmed up for that, we have a quick trivia question. The trivia question is that basically 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 2 patients who have surgery for heart failure are readmitted to the hospital within 30 days. That means up to half of the people who have this surgery. How many of those heart failure readmissions could we avoid with a good telehealth program? You got 46%, 75%, 38%, or 83%. I mean, all this is subjective, but I think the question is just how much of this can we avoid? And you can go ahead and put that in the chat. Think about it a little bit. We do have a report that we highly recommend. We've plugged it before, but it is still really relevant and collects a lot of good information. Increased wellness and economic return of universal broadband infrastructure. That report also does anticipate digital equity programs, not just getting the infrastructure out there, but making sure that people can use it. The answer is 75%. 3 out of 4 patients could be 3 out of 4 patients who are readmitted to the hospital would not have to be if they were monitored using a modest telehealth program, not like cutting edge. We're talking about stuff that we could do, even before the pandemic. So there's a lot of work that could get done. Now, as we're moving into this telehealth segment, we have a video that has been prepared, and I'm going to set that up, and then we're going to do Q&A after it. So feel free to throw questions into the chat as the video is rolling. It's a really helpful discussion about an existing project. People use internet access for all sorts of things, but something that we all need is better access to healthcare. And that's what this is getting at here. Telehealth can and will be a powerful driver for broadband adoption. This video comes to us from the Enterprise Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's going to give us a peek into a pilot project that is underway. It is ongoing in the Orchard Knob neighborhood, which is historically underserved in Chattanooga. I want to give a shout out to Deb Sosha. Someone wrote Deborah in the chat. Deb Sosha, President and CEO of the Enterprise Center, someone I've long worked with and just treasure her work in this space. And the entire great team that they have down there in Chattanooga who put this together. We're going to have Q&A in a second with Jeff Milner and Catherine Jeter from the Enterprise Center. So let's roll this video. I'm going to read the captions that come out, the prompts that are being responded to in the video live. So I think we get that video up there. Rye. So it's called Bridging Health Gaps. And the first question is, go ahead and roll it. The first question is about to be displayed. It's written on the screen in text, and then I'm going to read the questions out loud because we didn't add that audio. Can you describe the projects you're involved with?
The Orchard Knob Collaborative, the TVA Connected Communities. It is a collaboration of community partners that have come together for the last 4 to 5 years, working specifically with the Orchard Knob community residents and providing access to resources around improving the homes there in the Orchard Knob community, which are very historic homes, working with partners like Park Ridge Medical Center and providing 1,000 telehealth visits, working with other local partners like EPB, Green Spaces, the Enterprise Center, and providing expandable Wi-Fi hotspots in the community. And offering Tech Goes Home classes for the residents and many other services, exactly looking at the needs of the Orchard Knob residents and prioritizing those needs to what they need and want.
So at Tech Goes Home, we seek to pursue digital equity, inclusive opportunities across the board for all populations who are in need. One of our main populations that we work with is the senior population. And so as part of this endeavor, we have built telehealth stations, which we have placed throughout various senior centers in Tennessee with the objective goal of improving the quality of life and mental and physical health care of our seniors.
Rural Tennesseans face.
Data taken both during and post-COVID would suggest that almost a quarter of our senior population is dealing with mental health struggles, whether it's loneliness and depression or a reliance on substances and insomnia. However, majority of them are willing to accept and receive health services, both mental and physical, and to talk to someone about that. With rural areas, the concern becomes more of an access issue. And so not only are some of them isolated to the point where they have no physical capabilities or the affordability might be an issue, access to technology, the availability of broadband when you live off the grid in rural Tennessee is sometimes a constraint, and it inhibits their ability to receive quality, affordable, accessible health care.
Kinds of barriers to healthcare do residents of Chattanooga's Orchard Knob?
Because that is an older population, they tend to stay isolated. And I think that's one of the things that at least I've seen in working with this project is that they are now more able to access the things that they have not been able to in terms of their health care. Even though that hospital is just a few steps away from their homes, It's not to say that they did not have that connectivity or accessibility before. They did. But in Black and Brown communities, I always like to say just because the door is right there in front of you does not make it accessible. And that is a barrier in itself. And so what these types of projects does is that it's meeting people where they're at.
What's the impact of telehealth on chronic health conditions and local communities?
Oh, the economic impact is huge with this because what it does, I mean, again, I think for me, having worked in both urban and rural health, I've seen it. You know, when you talk about in rural settings, the number of hospitals that have closed, I've been on the front lines on that work, right? But in and itself, that when we can be champions of our own health is very empowering in terms of the work that we're doing in Orchard Knob. One of the things that I hope to see is one, not only does it improve the lives and the well-being of the residents themselves, but one of the things that I hope it does is the economic impact to that neighborhood. Will it bring jobs? Certainly. I think I could see that in the near future is that it will bring jobs to that community. The impact to the hospital, to Park Ridge Medical Center, the growth around just the neighboring communities. So the economic impact is invaluable, not only to the residents, the individuals themselves, but the collective good of everybody, the community, and the organizations, everybody within that infrastructure.
Will telehealth drive broadband adoption?
When looking for reasons why broadband is imperative, why the access to quality, affordable internet is imperative, then telehealth is the most major tool that I could think of that could be a catalyst for a change across the board. And kind of to echo what Catherine said with what she's seeing at Orchard Knob, I know with our senior stations, with the broadband efforts and the internet being more accessible and affordable, you see across communities and across senior centers how they will have like telehealth Tuesdays and bring your own device Saturdays. And it's more of that familial concept where not only do they have access, but they have the capability and, as I mentioned, the self-confidence to bring these devices, to utilize the tools that they are being given to thrive more in their community, whether that is just learning to use their device more, to Google, to Zoom grandchildren who live across the country, or to reach out to pair a quality nutritionist with based on the results from their most recent virtual doctor's appointment.
Thank you. So that was Rachel Morrow who finished up speaking there, and we are now bringing up Catherine Jeter, as well as I'm told we let Jeff Milner in the studio, and I'm not sure why we did that.
Poor substitute for Deb Sosha, but you get Catherine. So,
Catherine, it is wonderful to have you here, and it's good to see you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So for those who don't know, Jeff does wonderful work, and I tease him mercilessly for no reason other than the fact that he's a funny guy. Catherine, you are a former elected official, and I feel like I want to ask you the first question, which is basically like, we don't see this sort of thing happening around the country in very many places. How did this get going? What is so special that you were able to get this going in Orchard Knob?
Well, thank you so much for having me and for this question. I would say I think what's so special is because it's our city, right? And the great work that we're doing here at the Enterprise Center. But I think first off, I think it happened anywhere. So I don't think it's just unique to our city here in Chattanooga. But I think that it has a lot to do with the issues that we're seeing here in our city. I think it has to do with the collective mindset of our partners, that they decided to come together and say, hey, no longer can we be isolated in the work of our missions, of our organizations, that we see the need of a unique community like Orchard Knob, and now it's time to come together and really collectively put together a game plan that is going to change the health and well-being of a community like Orchard Knob.
Thank you. Jeff, go ahead, jump in.
Oh yeah, I'll just add, as we share two of the different projects they're working on, as Catherine said, right, we have this infrastructure in Chattanooga. There's an opportunity for communities across the country to have similar infrastructure. We're able to do this work because it exists. We're able to think about what changes for a community because connectivity ceases to be the barrier, as we see in rural communities that we're working in Tennessee right now, to accessing healthcare. Health is one of the things that can change because of that investment, and using those lessons as we look towards communities across Tennessee and across the country.
Jeff, can I ask you what is the result that you're really excited about coming out of this work?
I think for me especially, right, it's this concentration of services. It's not piloting it in the traditional sense. It's not the same sort of experimentation. What's the one thing that we can look at? It's working with these partners across the board. The smart city approach, really what changes in the lived experience. You don't have to pick one or two things at once. You can really listen to neighborhoods, you can listen to residents, and you can meet a breadth of those needs together. And I think that's huge. I think that's demonstrating when you take connectivity out of the equation, what happens when partners across the board are able to actually listen and work with residents.
Thank you. And then Kathleen, I have a question, which is, I feel like as an elected official, like you're used to listening to people. And then when something goes right, there's not a lot of discussion about it anymore. It's only when things go wrong. And so I'm curious, are you learning any lessons about what would come next? If you have Orchard Knob in this telehealth 2.0 in a few years, are there things that you're learning that you would need to address, or what you would recommend for other people as they try to pilot something similar?
Oh, yes, definitely. That's one of the biggest things that we're finding is, what are those lessons learned, right? So that this work can continue, not only here in our great city, but nationwide. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest lessons and takeaways for me as I continue to work in this community is that you got to show up. That's one of the things that the residents of Orchard Knob is consistently showing us is that, they are the drivers of the work. They're the heart of this work. And as Jeff said, that, that many times as leaders, whether you're an elected official or you're a health administrator of the hospital or whatever, is that we have assumptions. We come saying this is what this community needs. But if they're the ones that really are driving this work, then not only do we have to show up, but we do have to listen, but we have to be consistent in this work. I think many times that we show up, we come in, we deliver a service, and then we go away. And one of the lessons learned is that we've got to be consistent. And that's one of the takeaways that we're seeing. Thank you.
And I think that's a really good reminder of the hard work that this takes. This isn't going to be an easy problem to resolve. Any last comment? We're about to move to our keynote, but I don't know if there's a last comment that you'd like to add.
For me, I think, that broadband and telehealth plays a very crucial role in communities like Orchard Knob, and we're very appreciative of a project like the TVA Connected Communities pilot that we've started here in Orchard Knob, and we're very thankful, and we look forward to seeing where it goes.
And Jeff, any last comments? Oh, Jeff,
I know better than to try and follow Catherine. I'll just second that. And again, this opportunity to do both of these things at once, to not have to think about infrastructure, the programming, the things that make it valuable separately, but together to move, further, faster together. And so thank you for having us as part of this conversation, Chris.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to have you both. And we're gonna run into trivia, and then we're going to bring on Joshua Edmonds, who is terrific. But I did want to say, like, I feel like Chattanooga is this magical place where they just keep doing such a great job. They've got great collaboration there, and we're looking forward to continuing to cover the great work that is happening, in part because I think their success is bringing more people in that want to do really cool things. So it's a great community. Pamela, please go ahead.
Awesome. So we have our final trivia question. So that'll be put on the screen. Awesome. Thank you. So which city has the highest percentage of eligible households enrolled in ACP? Is it A, Columbus, B, Cleveland, or C, Detroit? And this is from the ACP dashboard, which...
And because I'm an admin, I can see Joshua smiling backstage right now.
Perfect. And that is exactly why we came up with this question. If you guessed C, then you would be correct. Detroit has the highest percentage of eligible households enrolled in ACP, and the second highest is Cleveland, and both of which Joshua had initially was working for Detroit, and now he's with Cleveland with Digital C.
So let me introduce Joshua. I met Joshua for the first time in Cleveland at Net Inclusion, which, you know, if anyone is listening to this call and you're not planning to go to Philadelphia in February, you're doing it wrong. You should definitely be there. At that point, he was in Cleveland with the Cleveland Foundation. Since then, he was in Detroit, and now he's back in Cleveland. Everywhere he goes, there's an improvement dramatically in high quality internet access among people that have been left behind. He's one of the, I think, foremost thinkers and speakers in combining all of the digital equity that we normally talk about in terms of the skills training, devices, affordability, with access, and making sure that people have a network that will actually meet their needs and deliver service that they can use. And so, you know, he's someone that's always impressed me as both addressing the root of the problem as well as symptoms. And so we're going to have him do a presentation, and then we are going to do some Q&A, and then we'll be wrapping up the show. So Joshua, please take it away.
Wonderful. Well, I also set a timer, so I think I had 10 minutes. So we'll see how that works. The only thing I seem to be having an issue with is sharing my screen.
If you click the present button, and directly above that is share your screen.
I think that it's not. I'm clicking that, and then above it, but I think what we're seeing is my computer's not letting the permissions happen.
In that case, Rye will pop it up in a minute or two if you just want to get going.
Okay.
Because we have your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
It'll be loaded.
Okay, great. All right. So, well, first things first, again, Joshua Edmonds, I appreciate all the kind and nice words that were said about me. And obviously, I had a very authentic smile when I saw the ACP enrollment with Detroit and Cleveland. And what I want to share with you all today, I know that we're at a very interesting point. A lot of the BEAD funding, we're very well aware where it's going. And I think that from a local alternative broadband provider, I wanted to share with you all just a little bit of insight on how we've been able to have a really big win in Cleveland, and how that's actually going to alter a lot of the conversation around digital equity. And what I mean when I'm saying digital equity in this particular instance, I'm talking about the parallel between infrastructure and, again, our traditional digital inclusion work. A bit of a brief background to Digital C. So Digital C was created in 2015. It is a 501c3. I'll get into a little bit more detail as the slides progress on where I've been able to take it on in my short term. I took over as CEO November 1st of last year. So my 1-year anniversary is coming up. And prior to that, I did spend the last 4 years in Detroit as the Director of Digital Equity and Inclusion. And I do have to give a shout out to the Connect 3 and 3 team over there, because I'm seeing another successful Digital Inclusion Week. And while I have been able to do a lot of stuff with Digital Inclusion Week in Cleveland for this time, you know, it is an honor to be able to be in front of you all today. And so from I can next slide this, or who's controlling this? Oh, okay, great. We'll just next slide this stuff. All right, so real quick, we are a 501c3. We love Cleveland in that we are headquartered in Cleveland. So Digital C, on one hand, we operate out of the Midtown Tech Hive. That is our headquarters. It is about a 13,500 square foot space where we do community events. We actually do our digital literacy skilling navigation classes present on site. So a lot of our customers that we get on the internet side are also residents who we might put through some type of training. So it actually does allow us to have a very effective lightning rod that's constructed, and we can be a more effective headquarters in representing what I would say is the best of a community-based network approach. Right now, our network coverage in Cleveland spans about 23,500 households. That's coverage. That does not necessarily mean that's how many subscribing households we have. Subscribing households, we have about 2,300 subscribing households. And the reason why that's significant is just because we've been able to build this as a pilot of networks. And over time, we've been able to really grow into a real community-based network. I can provide more detail on that later. We have about 40 staff, and we are officially a wireless internet service provider, or WISP. And this is just really exciting news. But last week, we did officially win our request for proposal. We did go through the council, and we were awarded a $20 million RFP that comes with about $33 million in matching funding to build a citywide network in Cleveland. And that service is at $18 a month. And so we're really excited about not only having an $18 a month service that we'll be able to provide to every Cleveland household. In addition to that, the speeds are going to be symmetrical, 100-100. And there's a lot of reasons for why we chose a symmetrical speed. The big one was that was the original ARPA standard on deployment. So anyone who is going after ARPA funding, and should your municipality decide to uphold that rule, then that's what we had to do. And so what you're all actually seeing on your screen is one of the towers that we actually brought live recently that's already providing 100-100 in a surrounding area. So we're really excited about that RFP. And quite frankly, that's really what I want to talk about. I think that for a really long time, Cleveland was considered one of those least connected cities. And I mean, we still are, full disclosure. And I know that this has been something for those of you who have been in this space, you've heard about this least connected city list for so long. And it feels really great to be able to actually not forget all of the work that we did on the digital inclusion, on the digital navigation work, on getting the devices out there. Locally, PCs for People is headquartered here as well. Not their national headquarters, but they do have an operating center out here where we have the device play. We have a Greater Cleveland Digital Equity Coalition that is convened by the Cleveland Foundation. And so there are a lot of other active actors in this space. And I think it's really cool for us to be that alternative broadband provider that can work with the existing infrastructure from a social standpoint, but then provide the infrastructure in the digital sense too. And so we see, our role right now of being able to see two other big providers. I mean, in Cleveland, we have the big guys here as well. And to be able to effectively come out on top within this RFP, that is a really bold sign and a great sign. And I want to say for folks who might be representing alternative broadband providers, or people who might be in the wireless industry, or anyone who just might be fed up with maybe their big provider in their town, this is a legitimate victory for all of us, even beyond Cleveland. Next slide. So how do we do it? One, authentic community engagement. We definitely prioritize that. And full disclosure, this is the stuff that we'd had to do anytime. As Chris mentioned in the introduction, it seems that like between Cleveland and Detroit, they've been able to accomplish a lot of things. And I feel great to be able to have a significant presence in both cities. And so these are even lessons gleaned from even the work that's been doing there. And I know a lot of you are doing it too. So in many cases, this should feel like a review and or confirmation for the work that you all are already doing. So yes, we did do a block party. We have done several block parties throughout the city. We have obviously leveraged our partnerships in the real time, and I'm out here. I think that that's the big difference that people are even seeing locally. Just seeing leadership, executives, or whomever just showing up and having a good time. That's been really helpful for us to even get in front of or even put into practice what we all believe. And I think that's really kind of, maybe I can direct the conversation for people to see that I'm putting into practice the things that we've been saying for quite some time. Next slide. So we also were very focused on our branding. I'll be honest, as a nonprofit 501c3, it was very difficult for us to, and I would say that in a lot of the digital inclusion space, nonprofits, we're well represented here. And I think that what we oftentimes run into is we're well represented here, and it feels in many cases like an echo chamber. And I don't mean that as an indictment. I mean, that's just what it is when we look at the breakdown of who attends these. But what ends up happening is once you actually translate that over to the political side, it doesn't really translate too well all the time. And so one of the things that we had to do is we actually had to rebrand ourselves as a technology social enterprise instead of just us saying a nonprofit all the time. We still are a 501c3, we still have a nonprofit mission, but we've been very focused on our brand to actually be able to stand up alongside the bigger companies and have that same brand polish too. Next slide. We also prioritize demystifying our technology. We just had to make it so it's accessible. Actually, on the picture at the top, you're actually seeing a council person who initially was very skeptical of Digital C. And we just kept inviting him out over and over and over again. And eventually, he actually became a supporter. And last week, he actually led the vote that was a unanimous vote for us to be successful. And so we just kept chipping away, providing people an opportunity to understand the technology. Because say what you want, but the digital divide has symptoms well beyond the people that we typically would say are on the wrong side of the digital divide. I think by some extension, all of us are, due to the proximity of the issue, on some type of the wrong side of a digital divide. And the more we're able to, one, see ourselves in that, the easier it is for us to be able to get people on a different side if they have a different opinion. Also, we definitely built the relationships with City Council, and we were active. And I want to say that because a lot of these decisions are local decisions. And before funding becomes available, I would just really strongly suggest, I mean, you might already have a City Council champion, but for us, we needed every member to know who we were, what we're committed to doing, and having a legitimate relationship. Because the noise was really loud, it was deafening at one point, and you all could probably, even if you wanted to see an interesting trajectory of our media cycle, you can go back to what people were saying about us in June, and you'll see why you want to have friends with City Council. Next slide. And we also prioritize not sweating the small things. I'll be honest, and you all know this, the minute we try and do anything in this digital equity realm that is legitimate digital equity, meaning that it is actually going to the root of something, like you are now shaking the foundation of a system that some people don't feel comfortable being shook. And when you get into that, there's going to be bees. They're going to come after you, and they're going to sting you a little bit. But our whole thing was not to sweat the small stuff. What you're seeing here was actually a blog post that we wrote about the power of upload speeds, because we're on 100/100, we're symmetrical. We explained why downloading was good. We explained why uploading was good. We did that in a public-facing blog. And what one of the telecom companies did is they actually took our blog and then they passed out a fact sheet on why we were wrong. Well, why they thought we were wrong, I should say. And they didn't put their name on it, but they had that all in the council offices right before the hearing where they were going to make the vote. And see, things like that, you could really look at that and get angry. But admittedly, we anticipated that happening. And so as a result of that, it's just something I would tell you, no matter what it is that you're doing, there's going to be those things that are going to come your way. And if they're not coming your way, I would argue what foundation is actually being altered. Next slide. And ultimately, we never lost hope, because to be honest, I'm oversimplifying the challenges, really what we did to get to the point of being able to get the vote. When I moved back to Cleveland from Detroit, November 1st, I was in front of the review committee at City Hall. Thankfully, a lot of the stuff that we agreed to within the RFP is kind of more standard digital equity language. I mean, committing to doing digital skilling classes, digital navigation support, community ambassadorship, those things, we know that. But then also committing to do building a network in 18 months, $18 and 100/100. Those are the type of things that when I came back, I was told that we were not going to win the RFP. There was a lot of skepticism, and I was seeing it pretty bad. People were bringing up cases. We had former customers complaining about us. We had former staff that we fired who were then going back to the media and saying things. I mean, it was not good. The situation didn't feel good. I had a lot of anxiety, but at the end of the day, we did not lose hope. We always kept centering on the resident that we needed to serve. And I think that's the point where, for us, it feels good to be in the position that we're in. And then this is the last slide. I know you guys came on screen. We were saying too, happy Digital Inclusion Week on behalf of Digital C and the people in Cleveland. It does mean a lot for us to be a part of this. NDIA has been a longstanding supporter of just mine. I mean, not even just the organizations I've been fortunate to work with. But me personally, NDIA has been really great. Angela Seifer in particular, and then obviously Chris Mitchell has been a wonderful sounding board, and I love going on this podcast.
Good way to get invited back. That was terrific. So, the first question I had, you've already sort of covered, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. Advice for navigating local politics. And I think with a framing that many of the people who are watching, I think, have focused on important work that had not been getting done, that is less controversial. And they may have to head into work that will be more controversial as we start dealing with the neighborhoods that still do not have a high quality internet access option available to them.
So I think that it's all in the mentality. The very first thing you got to do is you got to center on a resident, someone that becomes your Superman or Superwoman, however way you want to look at it. Because I did some door knocking beforehand for our customers and was just out there where we had service, and I was thinking about the residents that I was interacting with. I'm like, I'm doing everything for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm not doing this for me at this point. I'm doing this for you and anyone who's in your position. And so that actually allowed us to be able to walk into more of a fire because we knew we weren't doing it for us. We were doing it for the betterment of the people that we're serving. And I think the other part of it is just at the end of the day, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. This is the digital civil rights equivalent. Like, we know that, and we're lying to ourselves if we're going to not give this moment this level of significance. And so at this point, I think it's more so accepting that this is the reality. And if you don't have, nor do you do desire to be in a fight, then I wouldn't say that's okay, but that comes with the territory. But for those that do, and for those who've been on the fence, now's the time to actually get engaged, and now's the time to actually push forward, because there's so much more at stake than even what we might be talking about right now.
Okay, then the last question is, I'm right next to Minneapolis. I'm in St. Paul. Both cities have elected officials that would rather talk about this than do anything. They might even talk big, but they're not budging any dollars. What do you recommend? We've talked with Project Waves before. They're doing great work in Baltimore. You had a sort of a unique start that people can look up to if they want to get more context to that. But a city that does not have much in place in terms of a real play for figuring out this infrastructure, what should they do?
All right, I'm going to give you all free game. So make sure you all take notes on this one. All right, so rule number one, if you're trying to do anything, understand how politics work, and that lobbying is very effective. And it is very effective. And lobbying for broadband or digital equity interests, that's not off the table either. It might feel gross, it might feel whatever, but you got to go through certain doors to get to these outcomes. And so lobbying is definitely really valuable. I would strongly suggest people consider what that looks like. Another thing that I would do, and this is what we did in Detroit to actually showcase the level of impact, we did a political poll. And I would strongly suggest, I know a lot of people in the digital equity space, they'll do a survey. They'll do digital equity surveys and they'll write a report and it shows the digital divide. Great. But from an action-oriented political strategy standpoint, if you're able to show what the constituency believes or what the constituency deserves, it then forces the political folks to then see the value of digital equity beyond this sidebar nonprofit-esque thing to be a thing that's actually satisfying the interests of a constituency, and that, if unaddressed, might result in their political downfall.
That's terrific advice. Joshua, thank you so much for making time for us today, and really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you all for the time. Appreciate it.
Pamela, that's time goes by quick.
Yes, I had a really fun hour and 15. I hope you and everyone else did too. That really much wraps up our event. I want to thank all of you for watching. I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us. And I also want to thank Chris for being a fun and great MC as always. I also want to encourage everybody to stay connected and join NDIA. You can ask any of your digital inclusion questions to our listserv. It's a great way to get some support. You're not alone in the work that you do. And we have fun community calls, and you can also get connected to our newsletter and access some working groups there as well.
Yeah, and for people who are about to walk away, we have a survey in the chat. Really appreciate your survey. Appreciate all the folks who put in questions ahead of time. We got to a couple of those. There's a lot more. We always use those to inform our next events. So please fill out the survey. You can note that I had the wrong mic input, and you can hear my typing at times, and that was annoying. Or that we should make sure we have more live captioning. Moment of, I took a note about that for the person who suggested that. So please leave us suggestions of things that we can do better. And also, if you want to tell Pamela how great she is in dealing with an unreliable co-host, she will appreciate that. I want to thank Utopia Fiber for sponsoring the event and doing, I think, really great work, reaching well outside the bounds of Utah to help other communities around the country. I think, Pamela, you've got the next bit.
Yeah, just encourage everybody, have a happy Digital Inclusion Week. If you haven't registered your Digital Inclusion Week event, please go on our website and do that so you can get on the map. And yeah, have a great Digital Inclusion Week. Sign up to NDIA to get some of that support, and just thank everybody for another fun event.
And I want to thank, again, all the staff at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, as well as National Digital Inclusion Alliance, for making this happen. On the day of the event, I'm always reminded of how much more work it is than we remember at times. And so I really appreciate people digging in, making sure it happens. Sean stepping up to make sure that things were covered when I started disappearing. If people would like more information about the sort of stuff that the Institute for Local Self-Reliance does, the Community Broadband Bits podcast is on all the major podcast apps. You can find it there. I've interviewed a lot of the folks that you've seen here, and we will interview more of them in the future. We also do a show called Connect This, which is where we learn how to use this platform, and goes in depth on issues in ways that you cannot find elsewhere. Thank you, Pamela. We are going to be planning one more event, and I'm always open to feedback, ideas about who we should include. Feel free to let anyone know. Certainly Yvette, Pamela at NDIA, myself at ILSR, in terms of what you'd like to see in a future show. But we do want to keep these going, and we are going to improve some of the video and audio hiccups that we had here. We're still learning, and we do a heck of a lot with Rye, who is behind the scenes making this work. We do not have a professional who does this sort of stuff, and I'm just really impressed at the grace that people give us when they're a part of this. So thank you all. We're going to be wrapping up right about now.